Hi, Anne-Laure. Thanks so much for joining me, friend.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
Me too. So I am curious, of course, about your book and your projects and different things that you've shared over the years that I've known you, but I'm also interested in you as a person. And I think as I come into this call, I feel really struck by a specific way of seeing the world and people in it, where like, how to describe this? I guess something like today, the world seems like a museum of beautiful people that God created, and you are someone I get to speak with and just witness who you are, and that's who I'm what most interested in, is you as a person and who you are and your soul and your life, and of course we'll talk about your specific projects and ideas as well, and our shared interests and curiosity and things like this. But yeah, so for me, this question I always ask people, I know it's a hard one and right off the bat asking about your life story, but it really helps frame that as like, yeah, what have you experienced and what have you gone through in your life? And often the specific topics we end up talking about are framed in that context of what you've been through and what you've seen and what you've experienced. So I'd love to hear from you about your life and what you've been through so far. And you can share in any way that you like, that you feel comfortable with, short, long, metaphorical, an interpretive dance. It's all good.
I do like dancing, so
Oh,
that could be a way to do it. But I'm pretty tired today, so I'm just going to sit down and walk you through it.
perfect.
Um, I tend to think about my life in two separate phases, like two big sections or chapters. And I would say that the first one was defined by a sense of emptiness. I was depressed for most of my life until I got to like adulthood, like mid 20s, and I was very successful on the outside in the sense that I did pretty well in school. I got a good job. I started working at Google. I started a startup, and on the outside, everything was going well, but on the inside, I didn't necessarily feel any excitement about any of it. And so it felt very mechanical. I would get up in the morning and just do whatever work I was supposed to do. And I feel like at the time I had developed pretty early on a good understanding of how the game worked and the roles to follow in order to be successful by a very following a very traditional definition of success, a very mainstream definition of success. And then there was a second phase in my life, which is the one I'm in. And I don't know if that's going to be the second and final one, or if there's going to be a third different chapter in the future. But right now, I'm in this phase of playfulness, experimentation, questioning. I literally have no idea where I'm going. I don't really have a clear definition of what success means to me right now. This is something that keeps on evolving. I allow myself to explore lots of different projects that may have nothing to do with each other instead of trying to be very efficient and climbing the ladder like I used to in the past. And so, yeah, I feel a bit lost, but in a fun, very generative way. That's where I am today.
What were you like as a child?
I was a I was fairly nerdy, but I also liked fighting with other kids. And I did like sports also, actually. So yeah, I loved reading books and I love sports as well. And I was described by I found a an old I don't know how you call them, like those kind of like school scorecards that your teacher write in for your parents when you're a kid. I found an old one recently, and my teacher described me as their favorite chatterbox because I could not shut up. I kept chatting, talking to my friends, asking questions. So I think I was a little bit hyperactive as a kid.
And what was depression like for you?
It was really this sense that mm, none of it was worth it. A complete lack of interest in what would happen next. This almost now I see it like this, but arrogant sense that I knew what life was going to be like. And so it was a little bit like if someone had spoiled a movie for me and I had no interest in wasting time watching it. And I looked at adults around me at their careers, their jobs, their lives, and I thought that that's what life had to look like. And I didn't find it particularly exciting. And a sense of boredom, really, not really wanting to invest energy in doing anything because whatever the outcome, I felt like I knew what it was going to be.
Hmm. Hmm. What was your sense at the time of like what the spoiler of the movie was, or what life was about?
Yeah, you do well in school, you get a decent job that hopefully pays okay, and then you get a mortgage, find someone you like, build a family together, hopefully you have good friends, and it really didn't seem terrible to me, but it just didn't seem particularly interesting or exciting.
Hmm. How would you say you view what life is now?
What's interesting is that I actually value these things now.
Hmm.
So I actually I I love that I have friends that I can have really good conversations with. I recently bought a house and I love that I'm able to paint the walls the color I want and maybe change the color in 2 months and spend a lot of time thinking about the kind of furniture I want to build and that I want to put in there and making a home where I can also invite friends and have my family over. I I love that I get to work on things that I find interesting, that I get to wake up in the morning and make myself a cup of coffee and read research papers about questions that I find fascinating and then write about them, and that I get to connect with more people that I find interesting and sometimes who also become friends. And this amazing cycle that is actually a lot of fun. I think as a kid being depressed, I was not necessarily able to imagine what that could look like. And so all I saw was this very linear version where it looked like almost like a step by step, like one of those very old platform games where you just would go from to the next level. It looked like that to me. And I could not imagine that you could have a life that looks pretty mundane from the outside, but that is actually really rich from the inside.
What's your sense of how that shift happened from the first chapter phase of your life to the second and from depression out of it?
Um, I got a lot of help from psychedelics.
Hmm.
Which have really changed my life. But even before then, I think there was a shift before I decided to try and get access to those tools that helped me so much. But there was a shift where at some point I just felt like that's not the life I want to live. That this life of emptiness was that I basically was creating the life that I had despised so much as a kid. And I was very fortunate that a few years ago, I started meeting more people, mostly via Twitter, actually, that had designed very interesting lives and that showed me that this status quo, this default that I thought was the only way to build your life, was not the only way, that there were alternatives. And so that opened a door in my mind, I think, just seeing through examples of other people that it was possible to live a different life, a life that was fun and creative and connected. And even though at the time I could not really feel it, at least at a cognitive level, there was a change in my head where I could imagine maybe there's a different way. And then through those friends, I was introduced to working with psychedelics that helped me a lot. I quit drinking. Started journaling every day. I started experimenting with meditation. I started dancing. Um I think I almost experienced what it's like to be a child, but just very late in
Mm,
life. And yeah, today it's not necessarily always perfect. I do sometimes have dark thoughts that come back, but the thing that's really changed for me is that I know it doesn't have to be this way. I know they can come and go, and I know feeling empty is not the normal state you should be in for the rest of your life, and that there are tools you can access and use to get yourself out of that state.
mm, mm. What's it like for you when you dance?
It's the best feeling. It's I think out of all of the different practices that I've tried to just feel better, that's my favorite one. I
Mm,
just love how I can do it anytime. I'll be working on my computer and I'll start having this feeling that a little bit of a ugh, like where I don't really want to do this thing anymore. And I'll just get up and put some music on and dance for 5 minutes. And I'll immediately feel better. It's magical, really.
mm, mm. I want to ask you a question about that I don't know the words for, so let me find them in my body. Hmm. Yeah, something like, how do you express yourself when you dance? What's that? What's it like to express yourself through dance?
It's very flowy. Like I tend to just follow whatever emotion wants to be felt. I don't really feel like I'm controlling the movements. I think that's partly why I love it so much because I'm someone who spends a lot of my time thinking. That's my job is thinking. I study neuroscience. I write a newsletter about how to think better, how to apply mental models and cognitive biases, right? It's all above the shoulders, all about the brain. And to me, dancing feels like I can tell my brain to metaphorically take a little break,
Hmm.
uh, that it doesn't have to always be in charge and to let the body make all of the decisions. So, yeah, it really feels like I'm not in control, but in the best way possible.
Hmm. Who do you feel like you are when you dance?
Nobody actually. I feel like I'm the movement. And
Hmm.
so that's what feels so nice. You can just be the flow for a moment and forget about who you are, your worries, your thoughts, all of that disappears for a few minutes, which is a yeah, an amazing feeling.
Hmm.
Do you dance sometimes?
Oh, I do. Yes. Love to dance.
Mm.
Um, if you were, if you took, come on a little journey for a second with me. If you imagined that um, you are actually the main character of a novel and God is writing the novel or the universe is writing the novel or something like that. And if you were to read the novel, it would be in the third person. Uh, h- how would the novel describe Anne-Laure from the outside? Like, what is Anne-Laure as a character like from the third person?
Ooh. When I was a kid, I really liked comic books with animals as the main characters. So I think I wouldn't be a person. I would be like something like a lioness or
Hmm.
and I don't think there would be a lot of dialogue. It would be a lot of a lot of exploring, um, going different places, meeting other lions,
Hmm.
um, getting lost sometimes. But yeah, I think that's what I would like the character to be like, and I think that's what I'm trying, not always succeeding to, but trying to optimize for in my life as well. The sense of having space to explore, to let go, to not necessarily be in control. So that would be a more maybe aspirational character.
Hmm. Hmm. What do you feel like are your virtues, and what do you feel like are things that are challenging for you?
Mm. Virtues, I um I think I'm a kind person that I care about people around me feeling good. Um, I'm curious. I love learning. Um, yeah, those would be the two main ones, I would say. Kind and curious. What's challenging? Um, I think I still struggle with emotional regulation, and I can sometimes get very stressed about things where rationally it's not that important. And this is not something I let a lot of people see, but I'm very grateful for my very close friends and my partner who are so supportive when I'm in that mind space that is not constructive, that is not particularly helpful. So, yeah, emotional regulation can be difficult sometimes. Um, and something I still catch myself doing is comparing myself to others. I really admire some of my friends who have gotten to a stage where I can tell they are doing all of the things that they're doing because they genuinely care about the thing itself. And I'm still sometimes questioning my decisions where am I working on this thing because it's going to get me the approval of my peers? Am I working on these things because it's going to make me be perceived as a smart person, for example? So I think yeah, seeking the approval of others and comparing myself to others is still something that I struggle with.
Hmm. How do you tell from the outside that someone is following the thing that's most alive for them, that they're most excited about, that they're sort of in harmony with that? What does that look like to you? How do you recognize it?
It's mostly the way they talk about it. I think the only way you can know is by actually having a conversation about the thing with the person. And it's just I don't think there is a list of criteria, but it's a feeling you can tell the way their face looks like, the way their body moves, the way they look at you, the way they smile, their facial expressions, the tone of their voice. You can tell when someone is truly excited
Hmm.
about a project versus trying to maybe, and very often this happens at a subconscious level, which is why I was saying I catch myself sometimes where I think I'm really excited about something, but then when I really pay attention, maybe not. And so versus seeing someone who is just this light missing really when they're talking about it.
Hmm. What has your own lived experience of that been like internally when you've been alive in that way?
It's It's really an amazing feeling. I also in a strange way, I also have to pay attention when I'm a bit too excited about something because I can work for 8, 9 hours nonstop on something and forget to eat if I'm too excited about it.
Hmm.
So there's a balance to find here also. But I'm not necessarily always trying to force myself to find that balance. I feel like sometimes losing that balance is not necessarily a bad thing. And if for a short amount of time, I'm actually being quite intense about a project, this is actually quite fun also to let myself express that intensity and that creativity. So yeah, for forgetting other so-called responsibilities or priorities and being completely obsessed with something that looks like that for
Hmm.
me.
Hmm.
It's a it's a good feeling. I like that feeling.
Hmm. 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 One of the things I admire about you is that, I mean, at least from what I know from the outside, you really built your own business, and it's really thriving. And there's a lot of people that have been part of your community. And I wonder what kinds of lessons you've learned through that process of, going out on your own and making this business and building this thing.
The main reason I think why my business has been successful and I've managed to build a community is because this is a phrase I use a lot, but I always try to learn in public. And from the get-go and still to this day and for the rest of my life, I'm not trying to be perceived as an expert that you can learn from, but a fellow student that you can learn with. I think nowadays people really appreciate that you're transparent about the fact that you don't necessarily know everything, and maybe you just know a little bit more than them, but that's something you learned literally 2 hours ago. And you're just going to share it because you're excited about it and you think it's interesting. And that doesn't make you an expert. That just made you a fellow explorer that discovered something a little bit ahead and who's just waving at your friends in the back and saying, "Hey guys, come have a look. I just saw this thing and found this thing and it's fun." So that would be the biggest lesson for me. A lot of people are not getting started because they feel like they have to have it all figured out, that they have to know the exact steps. This is also why you have a lot of people making money on the internet, selling you blueprints to build a successful business. And I would argue that you just you it's not you just need to get started. That sounds a little bit trite, but it's really to me the only way to build any kind of successful business is get started, experiment, try new things, do it in public, share the journey with other people in your community. And even though you don't know where you're going, you don't know what success looks like, what the perfect outcome looks like, you are going to be successful in your own way if you keep on testing new things and seeing what works and what doesn't, and improving like that in the process.
Hmm. Do you remember how you started to learn this lesson about learning in public?
It was in two different ways. I want to say it was kind of accidental, but I think it did start from noticing something and deciding to applying it. And when I went back to school to study neuroscience, we studied this psychological phenomenon called the generation effect, which shows that by creating your own version of something you're studying, you're going to both understand it and remember it better. So that's why we know that already, right? And I think I knew that already, but I had forgotten about it. But you know that when you're taking notes, you will remember it better if you write your own version versus just verbatim copy pasting whatever the teacher is saying. And you can take that further if you decide to record a mini podcast episode on a topic that you like, do a quick video, write a newsletter, anything like that that's creative around an idea you're excited about. You're going to better engage with it, form more connections in your brain, and remember it better. And so I decided to start the newsletter at the time as a way to apply this generation effect, take what I was studying in neuroscience and write about it in the newsletter in a way that was practical and useful to other people. And I think that's when I really discovered the learning in public aspect because very quickly it was evident that I was learning even faster by not applying the generation effect in private, but by sharing my notes in the newsletter. I had people replying, pointing me to extra research papers, telling me when I made mistakes also. I remember writing an article about power pausing. Have you heard about this?
Oh, yes.
You know, like how if you stand like this and you look up and you look strong, you will actually feel stronger. And I thought that was fascinating. I thought that was great. I wrote an article about this, and I had several people reply and say, "Oh, actually, there's new research that came out and that debunked it."
Hmm.
And I would have never known that if I hadn't written this newsletter. And so that's what I mean by also learning in public. It accelerates your learning because all of a sudden you have all of those fellow students who can share what they know.
Hmm.
And so yeah, you learn faster, better. It's also more fun.
Hmm. Hmm. Was there a second thing that you said that you learned about learning in public, or those were both in there?
Those were the two things
Uh,
where it was
the
first
generation effect,
the
and then
generation effect and then actually applying that in public.
hmm. What are the current programs or projects that you're working on with Nest Labs?
I'm actually going to launch my first cohort in Applications are open right now, but it starts in 10 days, I think. I haven't done that in a long time. And it's going to be my first time doing a coaching program, group coaching, which I've never done also. So we'll experiment and see how that goes. It's going to be 4 weeks where I will take different parts of the book and we will do group exercises, self-reflection, and then I'll give people in the coaching program one thing to experiment with every week. That
Hmm.
might be a little bit uncomfortable, but always hopefully generative and helping with personal growth. And every week we'll come back together and share what we learned. And so it's a mix of learning in public and collective curiosity and tiny experiments that we're going to run together. So that's one program I'm working on. And and then that's not necessarily, it is kind of a program for my team. We're going to run an experiment where in April, I want to go completely offline for 1 month. And I want to see if the business still works.
Hmm.
So we're already having discussions together and seeing what does Nest Labs look like if I need to take some time off, proper time off. What does the newsletter look like? What does the community look like? We have several social media channels, we have Instagram, etc. What does that look like if I'm not here to check everything, I'm very hands-on because it's my baby and I tend to check absolutely everything that we post. What does that look like to create systems where I'm not the bottleneck and while we still create educational content that is actually helpful, that people enjoy, that people want to apply. And yeah, I'm excited about that. A little bit anxious. I don't know what that's going to look like because I told them I am not checking my emails for a month. You will have to make all of those decisions on your own.
Hmm. 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 What do you feel like are your growth edges as a leader?
Trust, I think, where I think I have a lot of trust in my team. I'm very fortunate that I'm working with amazing people. I also think that this is the highest leverage um, kind of aspect of my personality that I can work on because I think the more I will trust them and the more they'll grow, the more the business will grow, the more I will grow as well. So this is both, I think, one of my biggest strengths at the moment, where this is also where I want to keep on working and growing as a leader.
Hmm. Hmm. What does it look like when you are distrusting, and what does it look like when you're trusting?
Mm. When I'm distrusting, it looks like a lot of control. Again, checking every single thing that we're doing, little copy for an Instagram post or things like these. They're not that important in the grand scheme of things, but I'm in this state which usually actually it's not mistrust towards the person I'm working with. It's in that moment a lack of confidence due to other things. It might be that we had an amazing partnership opportunity that fell through and is not happening anymore. It could be that I made a mistake and then I'm trying to feel like I'm in control. And so I become for a couple of days a bit of a micromanager and then I catch myself. I'm like, I'm sorry,
Hmm.
you can do your thing. I don't know why I'm doing this. So that's the mistrust part where I'm not trusting the person anymore, even though I have no reason not to. And then yeah, trusting is letting go, is really letting go. It's knowing that whatever the person decides to do, it's going to be the right decision. And even if that's not the decision I would have made, it's trusting that they had access to information or that they had different parameters in mind. And that, again, it is still the right decision, even though that's not the decision that I would have made.
Hmm. 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 What was the process of writing your book like? How was that for you?
Hard. It was really hard. I There were several reasons why it was hard, I think. And I haven't finished really unpacking all of it because I'm still in the middle of, you go from writing it to promoting the book and launching it. And so I feel like I'll still have a lot of self-reflection to do after I'm done launching the book. But for now, the reasons I think why it was hard. The first one was just coming from an online writing background where I can sit down every week and ask myself, oh, what am I curious about? Let's explore this and share the newsletter. And as I said, I make mistakes in the newsletter sometimes, and I'm very transparent about them. If people reply and say, actually, there was a new research paper, I will, in the next newsletter, include that and just say, oh, by the way, thank you. Several of you replied, shared this, here's the link. So when you write online, it's a completely different process. You don't have to necessarily connect the dots in between the newsletters. You can just follow your curiosity every week and post something that you find interesting. That's one thing. The second one is that because it's faster, you can make mistakes and you can correct them afterwards. With a book, I'm not going to run after people and say, can I have that copy back, please? It's on page 100. So it feels more final, and that creates a lot more pressure in terms of quote unquote getting it right. So that was hard for me. I was definitely, which is part of the process of writing a book. I think this creative pain almost of agonizing over whether this is the right way to phrase something, whether this is what you want to include, whether you should cut this, whether you should expand on something else. So that was hard because just because it was a book, I think. And then it was hard because it was a book in English, and English is not my first language. And same when I send a newsletter, I'm like, it's okay. People know that's not my language. And if it's not that phrase is not perfect, that's okay. With a book, not so much. Hopefully, I'm very much hoping that a lot of people are going to read it and potentially, hopefully, people who don't know about me. They're going to just pick up this book in a bookstore, in an airport. They don't have that background. If they read something that sounds odd, they'll just think I'm a bad writer. So
Hmm.
I don't have that context. That was also something that created a little bit of stress for me.
Hmm. Was there anything that was especially rewarding or that you feel like you learned or way that you grew during the process?
Hmm. In a maybe paradoxical way, my editor asked me to cut an entire chapter.
Hmm.
And that was a chapter I had really struggled with. I really grappled with this chapter. I was really struggling to make it work. And I got it to a place where it was okay, but still I didn't feel like I was really happy. And my editor, when he read that new version of the manuscript, told me, you need to cut this chapter. It doesn't belong in this book. And at first, my reaction was, oh, cut an entire chapter. What? I worked so hard on this chapter and he wants to cut it. And then I told myself, okay, just make a copy of the document, and in the new document you cut it and you paste it somewhere else. It's not lost. We're just going to have a look and see what the manuscript looks like without this chapter. And it was so much better. It was so much better. It was definitely the right thing to do to cut this chapter. And what it taught me is that even for a creative project such as a book, which feels like it's your baby, you're the one who you think you know best, right? You think you know best. It's your book, it's your baby. Even in those cases, it's better to collaborate with other people. You'll get a better result if you collaborate with other people. And I found it fascinating to realize this because, again, for me, a book felt like such a solitary creative project. And I hadn't imagined that working with other people would help so much in terms of producing something of higher quality. So that was a big lesson for me.
Hmm. About a year ago, you did a grant making project where you gave away $3,400 to help four people become scientists of their own life. Um, how was that project? What was that like for you? What did you learn from it?
This was so much fun. It was a lot more work than what I thought it would be. So I really kudos to anyone who manages any kind of grant program. It's a lot of work. It doesn't look like it from the outside because it looks like, oh, you just have some extra money, you're going to give it away to some people. But if you do care about what kind of projects you're going to give it to, and if you want to be here and support the people you give the money to afterwards with not just the money, but advice and support and marketing, it is quite a bit of work. Um, it was really beautiful, to be honest, to first see all of the applications. Um, the diversity of projects that people were working on or wanted to work on was blew my mind, really. I discovered some fields I didn't even know existed. One of the people I ended up giving a grant to was working on 3D printing pet prosthetics
Hmm.
because you have pets who lose a limb for a reason or another. Some of them are born with a limb that's missing, and it's currently very, very expensive to build prosthetics. And so, in countries, this person is from Indonesia. In some countries, it's just impossible. It's out of reach financially for their owner to buy that. And so, this person was working on a 3D printer that would create those prosthetics for pets. This is the kind of stuff where I definitely think that this is a net positive for the world. And I would have never even thought of looking it up and saying, hey, here's some money to help you. But I was so happy to give them that money.
Hmm.
Um, it was difficult to choose. There were so many good projects, but yeah, it's one of those things now that I have in my bucket of memories where whenever I feel a bit down, I can just go there and think about that, and it
Hmm.
instantly makes me feel better.
Hmm. Hmm. That's sweet. Um, yeah, how did you choose which projects? Like, what did you learn about what you were caring about?
Yeah, that's interesting because before choosing, I started doing a lot of research about how the type of criteria that you're supposed to use and maybe building a matrix of the different factors that I thought would be important. And then I decided to scrap all of that and just to go with what felt right.
Hmm.
And I don't regret that decision. I think it was the right way, specifically for me and for this, it was the right way to go about it. And yeah, because of that, you have a really big diversity of projects. So there's this one, the pet prosthetics one. There's another one where it was a little kid, like I think she was 7 or something, and she applied with her dad, and she's building an air quality measurement device that you can put indoor to know how good the air quality is. That application was so cute. It was a little video or audio recording, I can't remember, but just hearing that voice of a little kid telling you about air quality, I thought that was amazing. And there was another one that was around psychedelic, another one that was a program to help people process their grief that I thought was beautiful. Also, just things that really spoke to me. And I think it was a mix of things where it was either, oh, I would totally build this if I had the time and energy. And I was so happy someone was doing it. And so I was happy to help in a way. And then other things where it just selfishly made me feel good to feel
Hmm.
like I could contribute to making that thing happen.
Hmm. Do you think you would do something like that again in the future?
Yeah, I didn't do it this year because it's just as I'm so busy with the book launch, and now I know how
Hmm.
much work it requires. And I really wanted to, and I would do that again if I do it. I read through every single application and I replied individually to everyone who applied.
Hmm.
So even people who didn't get money, I didn't send a big email with BCC'd everyone. I emailed each person and I told them what I liked about their application.
Hmm.
It took me days and
Hmm.
I would still do it this way. I'm so happy I did it, but I didn't have the bandwidth this year. So
Hmm.
I would definitely do it again. I think if I do it again, I would probably enlist the help of a friend. I think with two people, it would probably be a lot more manageable.
Hmm. 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 Coming back to the research side of things, is there any advice that you would give to people who, bump into research papers from time to time, but are sort of reading them on their own?
In terms of how to read the papers, or
Um, you were talking earlier about being like not necessarily an expert, but someone who's just interested, and then you're sharing what you're learning, and you're just kind of, yeah, like being a model learner. And what advice would you give someone about approaching learning when it involves research into these kinds of areas?
Mm. Oh, but actually, I can give you an answer I wouldn't have given a year ago.
Mm,
I found that uploading papers to any kind of AI chat tool is amazing to have a conversation with the paper.
hmm
That has become one of my favorite ways of reading papers now.
mm,
I just upload it. I mean, I usually just like skim it to see if whether it's interesting or not and relevant to the things I'm interested in. But I will upload it and then I'll ask questions and what are the methods? Why did you choose these methods? And even when you ask what are the limitations, the AI will point limitations that are not included explicitly in the
mm,
paper, which is
mm,
really cool as well because it's academia and sometimes when papers gloss over some of the limitations. So it's really nice how AI can pick up on that. And now with some tools that they're becoming better, you can actually upload several research papers and you can make them have a conversation with each other,
mm,
which is even cooler.
mm,
That would require the amount of like cognitive load of maintaining all of that information in your mind and your working memory and really connecting the dots between research papers that you would have to be incredibly intelligent probably to be able to do this. But now you can do this with AI where you have all of these uploaded and you ask them questions and you can compare the different methods, the way researchers approach things, how strong the results are. And what's really nice too is that if if you're the kind of person who likes reading research papers for fun, you're probably the kind of person also who's interested in different topics across different research areas. And sometimes what makes it difficult to connect the dots is that the different research areas use different words, different terminology for the same thing. So using AI again, you can create that dialogue and have the AI be a bit of a translator also, and you can ask basic questions in a very human way, just the way you would have a conversation with a friend. So instead of using the psychiatry term or the neuroscience term for something, you could just say, based on those papers attached, is dancing good for your mental health or
mm,
whatever, And then the AI would reply to you based on that. It's
mm,
pretty amazing.
mm. Yeah, it's incredible. I hope that I never take it for granted. I don't know. It's very cool. Um, what do you think you would have said a year ago?
Probably would have said the same boring thing that I have been told when I was studying neuroscience in school, which is read the abstract first and see if that's relevant to you, and then go to the methods, take some notes here, always check, which I think you should still do, always check who funded the who funded the research. Very important. Go to the bottom, check if you're reading a paper about whatever buccal health and it's like a toothpaste company that paid for it. So maybe take it with a pinch of salt. So there are a few things that you would still do, but those were I would have probably said that when I think about it, I would have probably given this default answer because there was no really good answer at the time. It was not that fun to read research papers. For me, the reason why it was fun was because I was writing about what I
Mm,
was learning, and there was this active creative process on the back of it. If it was just me sitting and reading a bunch of research papers, I don't think I would have been having any fun.
mm, mm. I'm glad I asked. I like hearing both sides of that, and both the sort of traditional answer and your sense of what's fun for you is writing about it, and then yeah, AI, speaking with AI about the different papers you're reading.
Mm.
Um, you had a tweet last year sometime about curiosity that you were saying that curiosity is like a seed and it needs to be planted and you can't just let it go unplanted. And I'd be curious to hear about your own experience of that and what are some ways that you have planted the seeds of your own curiosity.
Yeah, this is also something I noticed with a lot of my friends and in our little corner of the internet. But I'm curious about a lot of things. And the more curious you are about things, the more curious you are about other things because you read more, you discover this new book, you have a friend recommending this podcast, and you then fall into a rabbit hole. And so I I have to find ways of knowing which seeds I'm going to plant and then be intentional with what seeds I'm going to water. So I have different ways of doing this. I have something in my notes. I still use Rome research that I call my curiosity inbox. And that's where I put everything I'm curious about. And this is more of a way for me to not feel any FOMO. If there's something I feel like I would like to explore at some point, I will just dump it in there and I know it's in there. What's funny is that 99% of the time I just forget about whatever I put in there, which is a signal for me that maybe I was not that curious about it in the first place. It just felt like a fun thing in the moment, but I'm not that curious about it. But then what happens sometimes is that I open that inbox to add something and I see that it's already in there in a form or another. And so this practice helps me notice patterns where I keep on going back to the same ideas that I find interesting. They're almost like curiosity attractors, and where everything it's like a pull. I keep on going back to these. And in that those cases, I will usually create a dedicated page in my notes for that topic because I feel like, okay, that's actually a topic that I care about. And I will usually leave it at that for a little while. I will keep on adding things, and then that's when the watering metaphor is interesting because I can kind of make a choice here. Either I just see whether I keep on wanting to explore this and add water this idea and keep on adding to the page. And then if at some point I lose interest, that's okay. And that page will go and die. And sometimes I will stumble upon it while looking for something else and remember that, oh, there was a time I was really curious about this thing. Funny. Or if this is something I feel like could connect to other things I care about, could actually be very generative and supportive of some of the other work that I'm doing, then I start becoming a lot more intentional. And I might block a bit of time every week to read about it. I might look in my Twitter to see if there are people I know who seem to know about this topic and just send them a quick DM and say, hey, quick question, or do you have any resources? If there was one book you would recommend about this topic for someone who knows nothing about it, what would you recommend? And I'll start actively, proactively really look for information. And that's really this intentional watering where I'm making sure this idea is not going to die in my notes. I'm going to really feed it and expand on it and explore it.
Hmm. Hmm. Did you say earlier in the conversation that you have a practice of asking yourself something like once a week what you're curious about?
I I do that as part of my journaling, and for me, this is a strong signal of how I'm feeling at the moment.
Hmm.
If I'm can't answer that question, if I'm not feeling curious about anything at a given point, this is like an alarm bell for me that something is wrong.
Mm.
And it's helpful for me to notice this before anything else looks like it's wrong. So I do pay attention to this. And then it's just interesting for me also to then think about my week and what I want to work on. But at a more fundamental level, this is for me to check in with myself and see if I'm doing okay.
Mm. I love that. That's so true. Um, one of the curiosity members, department members, and I, Abby, we've had these calls for like 2.5 years where we're supporting each other in our learning practice. And at a certain point, we decided to start our call. Well, we do check-ins, like emotional check-ins, but then we start by saying like what each of us is burning with curiosity about. And yeah, if I'm not doing so well, then it's like harder to answer. There's just a few things. And then if I'm really thriving in my life, there's like 100 things I'm burning with curiosity about. It takes like 10 minutes to answer. Abby's like, okay, and you're curious about this also, you know? Yeah.
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 I actually use that metaphor in my book from you, so you're in my book, right?
Mm,
When I do talk about the cold curiosity and the burning curiosity.
hmm
So yeah, thank you for writing about that. This is also, by the way, the advantage of the benefit of working of learning in public is that you might benefit others in way you can't even control or you're not
mm,
aware of. Like, before I mentioned that I told you already in our last
hmm
call, right? But um you wouldn't have had no way of knowing that at some point I was trying to figure out what was the kind of curiosity I was trying to describe here. And I don't know, I genuinely have no idea how. I ended up on your page where you wrote about this. And I was like, that's it. That's it. That's the metaphor I'm looking for. And now you're in my book and people are going to read my book. And this metaphor you came up with
mm,
is going to hopefully be useful to a bunch of other people. And that would have not happened if you had kept those notes private, right? If you hadn't posted them online.
mm. I love that. And it's a privilege to be in there. If I recall correctly, didn't you add further to it and say that there was something like lukewarm
Or
curiosity or warm curiosity?
warm. Yeah,
Warm.
just warm. So the way I talk about it in the book is that so I mention your work and how you explain that there's cold curiosity and burning curiosity. And I tell people that if they want to decide on what their next experiment should be, they should go for warm curiosity. So not completely cold, but also this the point is not to find this burning curiosity, this thing you're so passionate about, because that can emerge from trying different things. And so it should be more of an inkling, that a feeling that, oh, there's something interesting in there. Not cold, no need to pursue this, but also not necessarily burning. That's okay if it's not burning. Just feeling like getting warm, you're getting closer to something interesting. And so that's what I use in the book.
Mm, I love that. I think that's so right. And yeah, very rewarding to hear that iteration of it because that will serve my own curiosity practice as well. So, um, mm, mm, yeah, what would you say you are burning with curiosity about these days, or what kinds of things are you curious about right now?
Um, that has nothing to do with what I'm working on right now. And that's how I know it's burning because
Uh-huh.
I just want to do it and it doesn't connect with
Yeah.
anything I'm doing. Um, I'm really curious at the moment about using plants for well-being, mental well-being in particular. And so I signed up for a how do you say in English? Herbalism
Mm,
course that starts in April after I'm done with the book launch,
hmm
where I'm going to go 4 times this year in the countryside in England on the farm to learn about how to use different plants and make infusions and decoctions and tinctures and all of that based on different aspects of your mental and emotional and physical well-being that you want to work with. And yeah, that's something I'm so excited about. And I keep adding things to my curiosity inbox that I want to read right now, but I know I don't have the time. So I'm just saving them. And I'm very excited to explore this in a month or so when I have a little bit more time.
mm, I love knowing that. Yeah. Mm, mm. Well, you've very kindly answered so many questions about so many things. Is there anything else that you'd like to share about or talk more about?
I just wanted to return the question to you if there's anything that do you feel any burning curiosity towards anything at the moment?
Hmm. A lot of things. Music. I'm doing a lot with music production. I've been working on that for about a year and it feels alive right now. Um, Tai Chi. I've been restarting my Tai Chi practice and really curious about, I guess, the phenomenology of that and like how it generates basically chi in the body and how to use that in practice. I'm doing this. I'm doing the workbook from A Course in Miracles this year, and that's already pretty psychoactive. So I'm just curious about like what that's doing and how it's going to shift my perception. And I'm also at the same time listening to Rob Burbeia's talks about emptiness, which I had done a deep dive into Rob Burbea a few years ago, but I there were like two areas of his teachings, including emptiness, that I kind of wasn't as resonant with at the time, and it feels much more resonant right now, especially because a lot of A Course in Miracles seems to be adjacent to what they don't use this word, but adjacent to what the Buddhists would call emptiness. And um, let's see. I'm also interested in fiction. I've been writing novels for the last few years, and I really love the novels I've written. And also, they are clearly kind of hampered by my skills. And like, there's some things I'm really good at, and then there's some things I'm not so good at. And um, kind of looking at my growth edges there and what I can do to build those skills that I'm like, yeah, I need to work on that to make better. I mean, I love my stories, and I want to write stories that are even more incredible. And yeah, so those are some things that I'm burning with curiosity about right now.
That's amazing.
Hmm.
I only recently learned about Tai Chi, which is where I knew the word, but
Hmm.
I didn't really know what it was, and I had never looked into it. And it's funny because it was a few months ago when I was at ecstatic dance, and someone there said that the way I was dancing reminded him of his Tai Chi
Mm.
practice.
Mm.
So I imagine, and so he talked about that energy flowing in your body, and that also made me curious about it. It is more in the warm curiosity category now. So if I'm done and I'm done burning that one first, I might have a look at it.
Uh-huh.
Um, and the novel writing also, I think is amazing. I would love to write a novel also in the future. I wrote a few as a kid and I sent them to publishers. They were not good enough. And I have a few friends who are writing novels right now, and I love that I feel like more people should be writing novels, even if it's just for themselves and their friends.
Mm.
It's such an amazing creative medium and also a really good self-discovery medium, I feel like. So if you end up sharing your novel at some point, I would love to read it.
Oh, they're the novels I've written are all public, so you can read them already. But
You're the
they're all short, so
embodiment of learning in public. I like because with a novel, for example, it's interesting. I heard you say this, and I was like, wow, that I felt like that's so courageous because I don't know if I don't know if I would be able to share first drafts of a novel. Yeah, that's amazing. You're doing that in public.
yeah, and they are very vulnerable. But not many people know that I've written them. I'm not like marketing them a ton, and but yeah, they I'm proud of them. And I did also all of the books I've written, I've sort of self-published. I haven't gone the traditional publishing route. I don't know, it's just more fun for me that way, I think. And but yeah, I like what I've written. And I think, yeah, as I write novels, I get really excited about other people writing novels too, because one, they're so powerful. They really, I experience them almost as like spells that I'm casting upon myself or that are being cast upon me. And they really do like rewire things psychologically for me. Um, and then also just the stories are so compelling. And so I'm curious, like what kinds of stories my friends would create. And if I love their heart and the way they see the world, it's like, oh, I want to see through your eyes and through your imagination. And also, just real quick, one funny thing about Tai Chi is that, um, all the movements look so graceful and you're like just flowing, but it is actually a martial art. And so you learn what the martial applications of each motion are. So you're like this, you're like, oh, this is beautiful. You're just like flowing your hand down. And then this is like actually taking someone's head and like shoving it into your knee. Like if you applied it martially, it's just all of these like beautiful gracing motions. Like this is cutting someone's like throat or something. And just like, okay, it's funny that that's just like hidden in these beautiful, graceful, slow motions. Uh, so
Is it one of those things where you learn the martial origin of the movement, but then once you practice, you forget about it? Or do you actually every time you go, you go cut his head and
mhm.
push him down? Or
I'm not 100% sure. It's not been too emphasized in my training so far, but I think ideally you'd learn what each of the motions martial application are and then kind of be aware of it. And then I don't really know how that translates to actual fighting, and hopefully I never find out, but at least early indications would suggest that, like, if need be, I think the motions would kind of maybe pop out from practicing them of you're like, I don't know, like, yeah, I'm gonna break this or, defend myself in this way or whatever. But that might be wishful thinking as well. And I hope I don't have to find out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Hmm. Well, thank you so much for sharing your heart and your mind and your life with us. And I've really enjoyed this conversation. And I'm curious to see where you go from here. Feels like, yeah, the second chapter of a very good story, and there's more chapters to come. Yeah.
Yeah,
Hmm.
it's such a beautiful way to put it. And thank you. I really enjoyed this.
Hmm.